Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to another Workshop Wednesday. This week's edition, it's What's New, and that means it's the first Wednesday of the month. So we're going to go back over last month and take a look at the latest features to Google Analytics 4 and, of course, the other platforms as well. Before we go too far into this, of course, welcome if this is your first Workshop Wednesday, and especially welcome back if it is not your first Workshop Wednesday and you're just a raving fan of measurementmarketing.io. My name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I'm the co-founder of measurementmarketing.io, and however you found us, whether it's through the podcast and talks that we give, maybe through some of the other platforms we've shared a little bit of our content with, like CXL Institute or Measure Summit or Social Media Examiner, maybe you're already a member. And we have two memberships. We've got a free membership, which we'll talk about, called the Toolbox membership. And we also have our paid platform, which is the Measurement Marketing Academy. So however you found us, we are happy that you are here. It's our job to help you learn how to use all these tools. And this means specifically staying up to date on what's possible with the tools. And it doesn't matter if you're on the strategy side of things or if the implementation side of things, you have to know what these tools can do, so that if you're a strategist, even though you may not be using the tool, at least you know what you can ask for. And of course, if you're an implementer, you got to know how to actually use the tool in case you are asked for it. And more importantly, so that maybe you can bring it up to the rest of your team and let them know what's possible. Now, I mentioned the Academy. That is our flagship training program. So all of our courses and on-demand workshops, the Ask an Instructor support, the Winner Circle, the Toolbox, all that fun stuff is back there. More on that a little bit later. For now, though, remember, just one thing when you're trying to watch these workshops, the number one pro tip I can give you in the world of measurement is not to try to do everything all at once. It's overwhelming and it's frustrating. You end up being busy, but you never get anything actually done. And maybe you've gone through that. That's because you're trying to do too many things at once. So when you watch this workshop, and you're going to see a bunch of little things, some are going to be something that's going to matter to you, some maybe not. Pick the one thing that is more than likely going to be something useful for you to know about and to practice and make a skill. Practice that, and then you come back, rewatch this workshop, and pick up another new one thing. That is how we do it without getting frustrated. Okay, let's get started, shall we? What's new? June 2022 updates. We're going to talk more about the latest that has just come out for Google Analytics 4, Data Studio, Tag Manager, and some others. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, of course, we always talk about the framework up front because it's important to put this in context. Too many people think learning a tool gives them the trade as well, and that is not true. Just like if you learn how to use a stove, it does not mean that you are a chef. It just means you know how to use a stove. Just like if you learn how to use Google Analytics, it does not mean you know measurement, right? So the measurement marketing framework helps us to understand measurement. It teaches us the trade. There's 3 simple steps to it. We plan, we build, and we launch. We're all marketing in the blind, and we're trying to use a system that reliably grows as revenues and profits. The trick is how we plan, how we build, and how we launch. So in the planning phase, we ask the right questions. Remember, results and how questions. We gather the information needed to get answers to those questions. And then most importantly, in our plans, we think about what actions we're going to take based upon the answers we're about to get. Then we go out to the build. Now, in today's workshop, you're going to see a lot of different updates that have come out in various platforms. A lot of them are going to affect your builds, and definitely your launch. And I'll talk about why in a second. But the results, remember ACE results. So we think about awareness, measuring for completion, measuring for engagement along the way of a journey. We make sure our traffic is UTM'd properly. And then most importantly, that those UTMs are structured properly so they tell a natural story that leads to action. Then we listen. What are we listening for? We're listening for the conversation that's basically happening between the users and the website. And it's just trends and patterns, right? We listen to our trends and patterns, and then we use those trends and patterns to forecast. Because remember, measurement is not just about what's working and what's not. Everybody thinks it is. I used to as well. But it's more than that. Measurement done well will tell you what's coming next, and that is why you forecast. Then you measure against your forecasts, and that's how you know what to optimize. So that's where it tells you this is the part that's not working as expected. This is the part you need to dedicate your team's limited resources so that they can actually move the needle and improve your results. And of course, that's how that whole thing happens. So that's the measurement marketing framework in a nutshell. Now, let's go ahead and talk about what's new for June 2022. We're going to start with Google Analytics 4, which I assume, again, big assumption, but maybe not that big of a leap, that Google Analytics 4 will have the most updates throughout this year. But let's take a look at what the most recent ones were for June. Now, first up, this was around modeling. This is by far the biggest one, so we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. Now, GA4, remember, it was one huge, massive difference between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4 is that it is built for the idea that it can actually use machine learning and AI kind of from the start, right? So if you'll see this being phased in more and more with time, but you already started seeing it with audiences, right? These little magic wands that are here where you can decide audiences, and it's trying to do like predictive audiences, that sort of stuff, right? So so you're already starting to see some of the machine learning and AI, but what they did is they pulled it out in the audiences section. The other place that you will see it, let me go into our reports here very quickly. And this has already been done. This is not new. Give me just a second. I clicked on the wrong button there. We'll get into reports. There we go. So if we go into our acquisition reports, you will see the modeling that is placed. And again, you may not be aware there's modeling here. That's what's important. You got to make sure that you're aware that this is going on. But the modeling has already been happening for months and months and months now in the predictive audiences. It's been happening already on the results side of things. So if we scroll over where you're measuring for the different attribution of results and it's trying to determine which traffic channels or source mediums are responsible for which results, well, that's also modeled, right? That's already been happening. And what we've been talking about, if you've been a fan of our videos and watching our stuff, you know that we've already talked about how modeling is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And in June, the very beginning of June, they basically announced just that. So now, instead of modeling just the attribution of, what result in which traffic source do we get the result? Remember, it takes time, can take up to 3 days for an answer to actually sort of get stable enough to find its trend. But now they're not just modeling attribution, they're modeling the actual behaviors. So what do we mean by that? Well, if we go into GA4, and remember in GA4, everything's an event, right? Every single event is a behavior. And we talk about this a lot at Measurement.io. That's all they are. It's the behaviors that the audience is leaving behind, right? The behaviors your users are leaving behind. All of these behaviors are going to begin to be modeled. Now, you're going to have a certain number of these behaviors back there, et cetera, et cetera. But essentially, Google Analytics has turned on the the algorithms and machine learning and AI and all that fun stuff into modeling what these actually are. Right? It's going to be pretty interesting here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up their support doc, and you can just Google for this if you really are curious about the details, just behavioral modeling. But how this works, and we talked about this in one of our videos, the future of I think it was around how to measure what can't be measured. And we were talking about how is analytics actually going to be able to tell you, hey, there was 100 people that saw your page, even though you're not going to be able to see that. How is it going to do that? It does it with modeling. And how we thought they would do it is exactly how they're going to do it. The real key point here is right down, let me see if I can find exactly where they said this. So right in here. Now you will have to have consent mode enabled. So for those of you who are in an area where consent mode isn't necessarily something you're enabling because you maybe not have to for your own geographic reasons or whatever the laws, obviously it's incredibly varied around the world. But this is a reason that you may want to start going, okay, we probably should get ahead of this consent stuff, get this in play, because without it, you cannot build the model. And you're going to want the model. You're going to want the model to help you. And so this little paragraph right here tells you exactly what's going on. It's basically measuring how many people have the ability to give consent, right? So when you sign up and you have little cookie windows or however you're doing it with your consent management platforms, they can give consent. It doesn't mean they will, right? So if the user says, no, I'm not going to give consent to being measured, that's fine. At least Google knows, well, that's one person that could have. So at least it knows they were there, right? It doesn't know anything after that. It doesn't know what pages they saw. It doesn't record any information. It just knows it was a possible somebody. Well, then, of all the people that are being measured, right, that's where the people that do give consent, which there's enough that will give you trends and patterns, and that's all we need as marketers. Remember, that's all we need. You don't need everybody. You just need enough, right, to figure out what the rest of them are doing. It will estimate the behaviors. So it'll go and it'll say, okay, well, of the people that we know saw your site, right, and were measured, we know, let's say 30% saw the homepage and 20% purchased or whatever. That same model then goes and applies it to the people that it couldn't measure, right? The people, and so it has to, well, there was 100 other people that didn't give us permission, so we're going to model those and we put that in your data, right? So this is the same thing that Facebook's doing. It's the same thing that Google Analytics is doing, and this is the way of the world. Please, please, please pay attention to this phrase. We have to get used to modeling, and that means you have to throw out accuracy as a word in your organization. Now, we did this years ago. We jokingly say this, but it is true. We call it the A word. We don't like saying the A word at MeasurementMarketing.io because we know accuracies never existed, right? The A words never existed. So trends and patterns is all you're looking for. And if you have clients, if you're doing measurement and you have clients that are insisting on accuracy, they're going to be sorely disappointed, and it's a losing battle. It's a losing battle. Accuracy's gone. Doesn't exist. Never did exist, really. But it's going to get worse and worse and worse over time. You just need trends and patterns. Remember, it's not accuracy you're looking for. It's not the A word. You're looking for a useful truth. How do you know you have a useful truth in your numbers? Because you have trends and patterns you can rely upon, and you can use those to predict what's going to happen next week and next month and next quarter. So this modeling is going to be a game changer for those of you who realize, okay, and we're going to set up consent. We're going to be able to start to see the modeling stuff going back there. And there's different things back here. You can go through this blog post, but it'll show, it includes estimated user data. That's how you know it's been modeled, right? These different events. But it's going to continue to be a thing that we have to get used to as marketers and marketing teams and individuals. If you're not on the marketing side, but you're doing the implementation of stuff, you have to help your marketing teams understand this, because they're not going to intuitively. They're not going to understand how to work with model data. And that means two things. One, that it is modeled, right? So it's all trends and patterns. That's it. Don't worry about specifics. It's always trends and patterns. And two is that modeling takes time, right? It's going to take time to actually get the model data back here. Just because it shows up in your Google Analytics doesn't mean it's going to stay like that. And it used to be like I know back in the day it was 72 hours for the things here. Now it is, let's see. So we have to have consent mode. You have to have 1,000 daily events. Of people who said no, right? That's essentially what this means, denied, over 7 days, and 1,000 daily users sending events with yes. So there has to be at least 1,000 people that said, no, I don't want to be measured. At least 1,000 people that said, yes, I do want to be measured within 7 days of the previous 28 days, as you can see here. And then it'll have enough what it needs to be actually build the models coming through. But just remember, they take time, and they're going to be a little bit of a challenge for most marketing teams to wrap their head around. So have those conversations early about what model data means, and honestly, the simplest way to explain it is it means instead of looking at numbers necessarily, like 3 to 5 users and 25 users, whatever, you start really focusing on percentages. So 30% of the people, 30 to 35% will do this, 1 to 1.5% will do that behavior, that sort of thing. Those percentages are how you know that you're speaking in the language of trends and patterns. So very, very important. And this is a huge update, and it's going to get bigger. Behavioral modeling, this whole concept of modeling, we've got to wrap our heads around it. So the sooner you start, the better when it comes to that. Now, the other aspect of GA4 was more for those of you who are in Europe, who have these challenges. Europe is all over the road with challenges. Every day it seems like there's a new lawsuit coming out, and you see all these little clickbait headlines about Google Analytics is now illegal. So Google Analytics 4 in Europe, to my knowledge, and of course I am not in Europe, so I'm the least likely to be able to have any credibility for this, but to my knowledge is not actually illegal. It's Universal Analytics that's having a problem because of the way it was built, right? Again, this is why Google Analytics 4 exists, because Google knew this. They weren't silly, right? They understood this was happening. So they built Google Analytics 4 so it could be segmented. And the big reason that most of the European countries and courts right now, I should say, not countries, but the courts in Europe are saying things are illegal is because they have a requirement that all the data, basically what happens in Europe, stays in Europe, right? So all the data that a European is maybe being collected from a site has to stay in Europe. It shouldn't be going to US servers. So this is what Google's answer to this has been. And right, you see here, European data collected, or Europe data, let's say EU, I should say. EU data is collected in the EU, and you can set up these little regional control policies, et cetera, et cetera. So you do this with Google Signals. Again, some of you definitely need this, others maybe not. But it's something you should be aware of, because it is one of those things. There's a lot of clickbait headlines that are coming out, freaking people out about analytics, and there's a lot of Google Analytics competitors that are also freaking out people about Google Analytics, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's fine. All of this stuff is useful to know what's going on, but it's also useful to know this side of it, know Google Analytics side of it, and that they are addressing this stuff, right? Doesn't store IP addresses, doesn't have any of that stuff. So if you have somebody who is one little information, maybe you got a compliance department, send them this, let them take a look at it, and then they can give you some guidance from there. Because obviously we are not compliance experts, so you should work with your own compliance teams to make sure you're on focus. But know that this is now here as part of the European plan. So with that, it was Google Analytics 4 updates. Now let's talk about Tag Manager. Now Tag Manager didn't really have any major functional updates, but I wanted to show you something, and this just goes into what we kind of just talked about around behavioral updates that are happening with these behavioral models, right? The whole modeling concept. So this is our little demo account here, and you can see here when you go into your tags, we have all the normal tags that you've probably used to seeing. And then all of a sudden, we started seeing this. So we see these featured community CMP templates. CMT is consent management platform. So this is maybe some of these platforms you're familiar with, CookieBot, Consent Manager. So I would expect more will be here. But the reason I brought this up wasn't because these are particularly new, because these are just templates, right? They've already been in there in the community templates, which hopefully if you use Tag Manager, you're already familiar with those. But the fact that Google is finding it necessary to pull those out of the community templates and feature them kind of on the main stage, which is this front part of these featured tags here, right? It's putting them in the, these are the ones that are all Google, and yet these are not Google, but they're saying, hey, you really need to focus on this, because Google is basically telling all of us, please put consent policies in place, even if you don't technically need them for whatever reason. They're going to be good to have because it will make Google Analytics 4 more useful, because it'll have that other side of the coin, that other information coming through, and they can figure stuff out a little better. You can get that nice, juicy modeled data, which we will all want. So that's why I thought that was interesting. Again, it's not really a tremendous functional difference, but just the fact it's here, be aware of it as we're going through. So that's the Tag Manager update when it comes to what came out in the post month or so. Now, let's talk about Data Studio. Data Studio has gone through an interesting change. Let's take a look at that one. Now, this is something where in our, we have a nice little, this is what happens when I build dashboards and not Julie from our team. So when I build them, they're nice and ugly. But here's a quick little demo dashboard, right? We've been using forever. So the new thing in Data Studio, and if you are using Data Studio, you've already seen this, there's this data section that's here now. So it used to be when you came in, I'm just going to click in one of these little widgets here. So you can see the setup and the style. That used to be all this was. It was setup and style, and that was it. And it had a little bit more space. So now setup, and there's all your setup stuff for whatever the particular chart that you're using, right? The little widget you're trying to adjust. All the setup stuff will still be there, just like before, except now all the style stuff is also squeezed in here. So it's still there, just a little more narrow. What they did is they added this data tab thing here, and I'm of two minds on this. I think I get the idea. Where it's nice to be able to see all the data sources that have been pulled into a particular report, right? So you can see we've got 6 pages report, all these different data sources there. And sometimes in the kind of with Data Studio, it's easy to add data sources and not realize there's already one added, and it ends up getting added again and again and again. And maybe that's what they were thinking was, hey, we can give somebody the access to the data this way so they can easily see, does this report already have access to a particular data source without just having it added again and again and again. Because you can see we've even done that here, right? A bunch of different data sources added over and over. So I think there's benefit in that way. The challenge is twofold. And this was pointed out by one of our certified measurement marketers, JJ Reynolds, when he's like, well, let's say I want a page view, right? So let's say landing page, which we can pull up. So you've got landing page. Well, which landing page do I want? Do I want it in this data source, or from 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 this data source, right? So again, I think it is challenging because it doesn't, whereas before, in the older version of Data Studio back in May, you just had the one data source here, your primary data source for whatever the chart was you were clicking on, and it was easy to pull it out. Here, you got to be a little more careful to make sure you're pulling the right landing page, right, in this case, coming through. So that's one thing. And the other thing, I think, is just from a visual standpoint, I honestly don't know what they're going to do, but I think they will have to do something. This is just really squeezes the whole thing. Either I would like it if they minimize this or had a chance to do it where it didn't take as much real estate as this does, because we just need this every once in a while, but not all the time. But meanwhile, the stuff that you really are playing with, which is setup and style, is all squished now. And unfortunately, my instinct, and maybe yours has been too, is to try to grab this and pull it across to make it a little wider, but that's just not an option as of yet. So I'm thinking Team Data Studio probably has a little more work to do on this particular flow of it, but it is the newest from a kind of a functional update, and the fact from a design standpoint, for sure, a user interface experience thing. This is by far the biggest deal that has come through. Now, the other one I wanted to show you, this is something, if you use Google Maps as a chart, you can now do a line map, which is pretty cool. So if I don't actually have a use case for this with our own organization, but it was pretty interesting. You can actually create a Google map with a line map on it. So you could one of the examples they talked about when they announced this was the idea that you can maybe visualize your supply chains, because those are all kind of sexy and in the news right now, the whole supply chain stuff, right? So maybe you could visualize that if you needed to. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they can now do that, right? We don't particularly have use case for it in our own business model, but maybe you do. And now, a line map is also possible. So it just overlays on the regular Google Maps, and you can actually determine a line map on the actual map itself, which is really neat. So be aware of that. If you want that, just look for Google Maps with Data Studio. And the Google Maps reference, just Google for that, and you'll see it on there. It'll talk about the line map that is there. So the Data Studio, that was primarily it. There was a couple of other things that weren't really, I think some of you might need this or be interested in this with Data Studio around Google Cloud or Google Workspace. If you have an admin setting like that and use what used to be called Google Apps or Google Business back in the day, I think they keep changing it, but now it's Google Workspace and Google Cloud. You can actually set up your Data Studio permissions for data sources and everything else at the cloud level or at the workspace level. So some of your team admins might have some of those features. If you have challenges with permissions all of a sudden, maybe that's why. And you can go back to your team and say, hey, I think we need to change those workspace settings, because now you can control it at that level versus the individual document level itself, which is what it used to have been before. And there's also been some API updates. So anybody who's working with the API, just make sure that they are familiar with that. It's pretty rare for our clientele because we do focus on mostly small and medium-sized businesses with this. But if you have any API work done, it's also been updated. So have them take a look at that as well. All right. So the only other thing that was a very, very tiny update I forgot to mention about GA4, but wanted to at least point it out, is they have done the search update. All that they did is update the recently viewed so that it's more things than it used to be. It used to be just reports would come through in the report section, but now like I was in the audiences section, so the audiences show up, or the advertising snapshot, or whatever the tool was that I was just looking at should be showing up here. I tested it with explorations. It didn't quite work for that, but it's supposed to work for any sort of custom reports you do. I mean, think about like your library, like that sort of stuff would be in here. Again, I think it's okay. It's a neat update, not something I particularly use because I rarely use the search anyway, just because we're mostly using the interface. But that was technically an update that came out right at the end of June, so I wanted to make sure that you knew about that as well. All right, now let's talk about what's new at the Measurement Marketing Academy. For those of you who are Academy members or thinking about it, the latest Win course is ready. So that's Win Google Search Console, where that is. So in your dashboard, you're going to go to the Win courses. When you pull up the Win courses, you'll see Search Console right in there. So the replays are there. They're just editing the final student editions. One other thing I wanted to point out is that because so many people have asked us, like, well, how long are your courses? And my response has always been like, well, they're how many hours of training is back to us? Like more than you will ever have time to get through is kind of the short answer, because it is a just-in-time learning platform, so that whenever you need it, it'll be there. But we thought it was a good idea to start adding duration, so we did do that as well. So there's our server-side course. You can see the BigQuery Basics course, the e-commerce course for Google Analytics e-commerce. There's Data Studio at 6 hours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're coming in and you're kind of wondering like how much time would a particular course have, you should see it. Anything that does not have a course duration, which right now is just that Search Console one, is only because it hasn't been fully edited for students yet. That's all. But it's there. You still have the replays to watch when we train live. But you can see just our Google Analytics course is about 3 hours for setup, 7 hours for the basics, 4 hours of Beyond Basics. There's Google Analytics Basics, almost at 7 hours. There's e-commerce. We did 5 hours just on e-commerce and really thinking that stuff through. So you can see how detailed and robust the individual courses are. And now you can plan out your time a little bit better too. So they all have that as well. So I wanted to point that one out. Next up, coming soon to the Measurement Marketing Academy. So we're going to have 2 wins that are coming out. Remember, we either do new wins or we do existing wins. We'll update them, right? So almost every month we're doing that. So we are going to be doing regular expressions, win regular expressions, which we did in 2019. It'll probably be about the same, about 3 hours or so, I would imagine. But we're going to go through and just update that. To be honest, regular expressions are still the same. So if you haven't gone through this, you definitely want to, because it's going to help you with analytics, with Data Studio, and with Tag Manager skills. But if you already know regular expressions as an Academy member, you won't need to watch this one again. We're just updating it because now it's been a few years. We want to make sure we update all the slides and give it the same look. But regular expressions haven't changed, right? What they used to do, the same symbols do the same stuff. So we're going to update that one coming up this coming month in July. And then in August, let me see, it just escaped me which one we're doing. In August, we're doing JavaScript Basics. So JavaScript Basics is a tag manager course. And the way that we did Tag Manager, you can see here, we've got the Tag Manager Basics and then the Beyond Basics, etc. But the JavaScript one we created because it was one of those courses, like Tag Manager is a tool that you don't have to be technical to actually start using, but you eventually gain some technical skills the more that you use it. I always liken it to WordPress. Like, you don't have to be technical to use WordPress and to make a blog post, but the more that you use WordPress, eventually you start picking up some HTML so that you can use WordPress a little bit better, right? And it's the same thing with Tag Manager, except with JavaScript. You just pick up some JavaScript. So we created this course for those of you who wanted to kind of really do a little bit more of an understanding on the structure of JavaScript and data layer pushes and all that fun stuff that you get into it. So it's definitely for those of you who have experience with Tag Manager, but we will be redoing that one. Not just because that anything's particularly changed with JavaScript, because it is what it is from a programming language, but because it's been a little while. So we wanted to update this and give it its fresh new look for 2022 as well. So those two courses are coming out in July and August. And then I believe I know it's getting a little ahead because it's not on this slide, but September, October, we're going to be doing Google Analytics 4 again, the Google Analytics 4 Basics, because we all know that platform will go through some changes over the next few months. So we'll be redoing that course as well. Now for boot camps, we are actually, as of this recording, we are a day away from starting the Universal Analytics, the GA4 Migration Bootcamp for July. So that one's already closed out. However, in August, we will be doing the Data Studio reports using GA4. There's going to be an entire bootcamp for those of you using Data Studio to teach you how to use Data Studio specifically with GA4 because it's got some nuances. And so you want to figure out kind of, how it operates and how to build reports from it. So we'll be talking about that. And that'll be an entire boot camp, which I believe will also be 5 weeks in August, starting in August. So if you are a part of the toolbox or already an Academy member, you will get that. If you're already a Measurement Mastermind or an Academy for Teams and Agencies member, you automatically have access to boot camps anyway. So just stay tuned to your invites. Then in October, so we will then do another boot camp that is the same one we're doing in July because we know it's just a popular topic. We only have so much space for each boot camp, and so we're going to be doing a bunch of these, but specifically migrating from Universal Analytics to GA4 and helping everybody move over. So there'll be another one of those in October. So if you just heard that we had the one in July and you wish you could get into it, but it's already closed out, so we can't get you in that now. But there will be another one in October. So stay tuned for that. Again, we send out emails to our list. So those of you that are Toolbox members, you will get notification on that. If you're an Academy member, you do get a discount off the boot camps where you get half off, so you can take a look at that. And of course, Measurement Mastermind and Academy for Agencies and Teams members, you automatically get them as part of your levels. So just stay tuned for invites as they become available. So that's the boot camps. Now, what was your one thing from this whole thing? I know for me, for a fact, by a mile, is the behavioral modeling that is happening back in Google Analytics 4. Modeling is going to be everything. And the faster that your company, the faster that your organization, that your team, that you wrap your head around modeling and how to get used to it. And just realize you're looking for trends and patterns and you're going to move on and you're not going to chase around accuracy. It is a losing battle, and it's going to be harder and harder and harder almost every month to keep going after that. And the more companies that insist on focusing on accuracy when it comes to behaviors, they're just going to be chasing their tails. It's not a worthwhile investment. Now, does that mean we don't focus on accuracy when it comes to what the bank account's getting deposited? No, of course not. Does it mean you don't get accuracy when it comes to your CRM? No, of course not, because your CRMs need accuracy, right? Your cart system must be accurate. There are certain things that absolutely must be accurate in your organization. But when it comes to measuring your marketing, at least when it comes to behaviors, which is what Google Analytics is really there for, it's to measure the behaviors, remember the conversation that's happening between the users and the site, that you can absolutely model because you just need trends and patterns there. That's it. So again, focus on modeling and really understanding how that's going to work and how you're going to work with it. And imagine a world where most of the data that you're looking at, especially in a platform like Google Analytics, is modeled data? Like, how would you operate with that? Because the sooner that you figure it out, the sooner you'll be able to take advantage of it, and the sooner that gives you a competitive advantage. So again, there's our framework. Remember, when we're thinking about the modeling stuff, it's definitely going to affect our trends and patterns and our forecast. That's where your modeling comes in. When it comes to the different information we can build from a story standpoint, Data Studio, right, with this little what you can do with that is there. Obviously, tag manager, consent policies, and all that fun stuff goes into the information that we can collect in order to get the answers that we want, right? We got to make sure that we have good consent set up in the first place so that we can take advantage of modeling as it gets bigger and bigger over time, which it absolutely will. There's nothing stopping that train. It's already happening. So we just have to figure out as marketers how to take advantage of it, because it is something that's going to be good for us. We just need to accept it and move on, and it'll be amazing. All right. Next week's workshop is a getting started workshop. We're going to be doing an update to a fairly popular one we did all about UTMs. It is for our implementers, those of you who are just getting started with this fun world of measurement. And we're going to cover the ABCs of using UTMs specifically for Google Analytics 4. That is because there are actually some new UTMs that came out with Google Analytics 4. So we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about how to structure all the UTMs together from different traffic sources so they tell a useful truth. Remember, useful truth is what we're looking for. And then, of course, we're going to jump into Google Analytics 4 to actually see where you see all this stuff show up and how you can use it to ask that question, like, how's my what traffic is working, which ones aren't. You'll be able to tell all of that after next week's workshop. So if you want that, all you need to do is subscribe. We are very quickly about to round out 4,500 subscribers. Thank you so much. Each and every week we are continuing to climb, and that is because of our fans like you. So thank you for spreading the word, for sharing it. I see it shared on LinkedIn. I see stuff shared in different Slack channels that people are a part of, and I see all that. And thank you again for letting everybody know, pinging your friends, tagging in your compatriots, and just honestly subscribing and showing up. It's been awesome. We do see all the comments. Again, I can't personally respond to all of them, unfortunately, because we do really emphasize and reserve our support for the Academy members themselves. And we focus on that with our Ask an Instructor support, but we do see them. And if you have suggestions, new topics, that sort of stuff, we love that. So thank you again for the kind comments that people have, suggestions for new topics, even suggestions for how we can make these better for you. We're all for it. So thank you for that, and thank you in advance for subscribing to our YouTube channel. The other way that you can get these workshops, this would be the next level. Like if you're ready to participate a little bit more with the measurementmarketing.io brand, you want to learn about more measurement marketing stuff, I would absolutely suggest you start your free Toolbox membership if you haven't already. There are thousands back there that have, so please take advantage of that. It comes with the most recent workshop Wednesday, so you're always going to see that. And of course, you always have the YouTube channel for the previous ones. But you also have about 40 some odd tools that we've created for our members, including the traffic tracking toolkit, the dashboard toolkit. There's a tag manager recipe book back there. There's a forecasting guide back. There's all sorts of stuff back there. So much more than we can mention here. It is completely free. It's our way of giving back to the community. And it's our way of, honestly, let's just face it, we're marketers too. It's our way of helping to make sure that you can get a little bit more information about our brand and learn our teaching style and see what's back there in the Academy without having to risk a dime. So just measure.tip/WW will take you to the page where you can create your free Toolbox membership. The only thing I personally ask is that you use it. So every 90 days or so, we kind of go through a clean, scrub that list of the Toolbox members. If you're not using it in that 90-day window, you may get an email that says, hey, is it okay if we shut down your account and make room for somebody else? Because we're not all about, I don't want 100,000 people back there doing all that. I want to have the right people at the right times that need this so we can help support where we can. So again, measure.tip/WW to get that free membership. The only thing we ask is that you use it. You can keep it honestly for free as long as you want, as long as you're using it. That's the only thing we ask. And then if you're not, just, let us shut it down for you, and then that'll free up space for somebody else to take advantage of it. So again, measure.tips/WW, and just use it. You can use it for as long as you want, and it's free as long as you're using it. That is the deal. And it'll just set up an email and a password, just put in your name and email. It'll send you a password and you'll be off to the races. Now, of course, we also talked about the Academy itself. You saw a little snapshot of that earlier when I was going through some of the stuff, but it's all the courses back there, which you saw. There's plenty of hours of courses. They are broken down into lessons and then topics for those lessons. They are very extensive. So all these other courses that you see other people advertising, they're just all in the academy. We've just done them all in one spot. We don't sell the courses separately. We keep everything there so that you don't have to worry about like, oh, wow, now I wish I had a tag manager course. It's like, of course you have a tag manager course. It's right next to it, right? So you have everything in one spot relating to digital measurement. And then we take it steps further. So eventually you might learn server side, and eventually you might learn BigQuery. And so we have those courses in there as well. So as your skills grow. So even if you're especially if you're just starting out, the academy is perfect for you. If you've got some stuff in place and want to level up, the academy is perfect for you. It is designed to help you to build measurement muscle, starting with the strategy, learning the strategy of things, and then of course, showing you how to use some different tools so you can apply those strategies. So that is the Measurement Marketing Academy in a nutshell. If you want to go learn more about that, including what the current offers are today that are available for you, just go to measure.tips/getacademy. Again, measure.tips/getacademy, and we look forward to seeing you back there soon. With that, let's go ahead and bring this one to a close. This has been What's New, the June 2022 updates, including the latest changes for Google Analytics 4. We saw Data Studio, Tag Manager had a nice little showing as well. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.